Mistake. This was a terrible idea. Terrible idea for a video. Oh my god. I'm so sorry, babies. I'm so sorry. The thumbnail I just did was such a struggle and I'm already regretting doing this video, but we're gonna push on because I have no other ideas that I can film at this late notice. So I was recently watching a video on lovely Shannon's channel. I adore Shannon's channel, if it wasn't already obvious. Every single Sunday Shannon and I host reading sprints on alternate channels, so like this weekend it's mine and then next weekend it'll be on Shannon's, and it's such a lovely way to spend Sunday morning. It's cozy vibes, we're all usually in our pajamas and it's so lovely to just get some reading done whilst also catching up with friends. And honestly, in the middle of like lockdown pandemic, it's been the highlight of my week. It's just been so lovely and I'm very grateful that me and Shannon found each other's channels last year and have sort of formed a little group. It honestly has made my heart so happy. So yeah, big love to Shannon. Go and subscribe to her if you haven't already, because she is just one of the brightest channels on BookTube and I love her videos so much. But yeah, I was watching one of Shannon's videos and she talked about all of her favourite book series, like of all time, because often on BookTube we talk a lot about the books that we're currently reading, the books that we've recently read, and we don't often talk about ones that, you know, have been our favourites for a very long time, books that we read like years and years ago. I mean, I sort of do, but I'm a very nostalgic person, so that's why a lot of my videos tend to do that. But it really got me thinking about that time in my life where I was all about reading series. I was really into YA when I was a teenager, like a lot of people on BookTube were. Like really went hard for things like The Hunger Games, Divergent, was so excited about all of the adaptations that were happening at the time. I even ran a fandom Instagram account that had 2,000 followers, which is not big in like the grand scheme of things, but to me it was huge, and I made proper fan edits and I was really involved in the community. And I think that's why I read so many series, because I wanted to talk about it with the community and I was so super involved in like making edits and sharing content, and I was on Instagram every single day. I even had like a group of people that we made like a fandom book and got it sent somewhere. I can't remember, I think it was like to Lily Collins or something for like the release of the City of Bones movie. And it's quite cringe often to think back on those times, but honestly like I really miss that community feeling, and that's part of the reason I started BookTube as well, was to have that community that I could just obsess over books with. And like when I look at my recent reads, they have all been sort of more grown-up standalones, but watching Shannon's video really got me nostalgic for that time where I was so into all of these series, and it was so much fun like obsessing over every book and waiting for the next one to come out and like discussing like theories and characters with other people in the community, and I just really missed that. So I thought I would do a video literally going through every single series that I have completed and just have a little trip down memory lane, inspired by Shannon's videos. So thank you very much, Shannon. But yeah, let's get into it because there's actually quite a lot here, and I was a little bit surprised when going through my shelves at how many series I've actually completed. So these sort of don't count in terms of YA series, but these are like my sort of childhood series that I found on my shelves that I have completed, and that is the Magic series by Angie Sage. And actually, do you know what? We're starting off with a lie, because I think there is one sneaky book that came out quite a bit after I thought I'd finished this series, so I might not be up to date with this one, but in my head it's completed. I read like what, how many? Six books of this series when I was a kid, and in my head it finished in a place that made sense, but I think actually there is one more that I need to get if I want to consider this as a series that I finished. I've also read the gorgeous Series of Unfortunate Events series. I go so hard for this series all the time. It is wonderful. I love it. I just can't recommend it enough, I really can't. Also the Spiderwick Chronicles, another staple of my childhood that I've also finished up to date with. I also read like the spin-off of the 3 books that were called Beyond the Spiderwick Chronicles, really loved those as well. And the iconic Princess Diary series, which I read a lot later. I knew about these books obviously when I was little and I was obsessed with the movies, but it was only recently within the last 2 years that I bought myself a box set and just binged the entire 10-book series, and I just had so much fun. And obviously if we're going to talk about childhood series, there is a sort of series that shall not be named, shall we say. I think you can all guess what I'm talking about. That was obviously a big part of my childhood, but for certain reasons don't feel like promoting. I mean, it's literally right behind me, so if you have any sort of deducting skills, you probably know what I'm talking about, but yes, we'll leave it at that. And if you want to hear more about any sort of childhood, like sort of nostalgia books, not necessarily YA, but like childhood, like middle grade books, I did do a whole bookshelf tour of my childhood bookshelf where I have all of the books that I read when I was like a kid. So I'll leave that link in the description if like that's something that you're interested in. And before we jump into YA, I'm going to talk about 2 graphic novel series that I've also completed that I just love. And the first one is Death Note, and I just adore these like edgy all black sprayed edges editions. I remember thinking I was so cool when I got these, and I think I was really ill when I picked up the first volume, and I just remember speeding through them, and because I was ill and I couldn't really concentrate so much on like, you know, thick text, and because it's mostly art and dialogue, it did feel a lot easier to speed through when I wasn't feeling so good, and I just have very fond memories of reading this series. It does get a little bit silly and convoluted towards the end, but I carried on, I stuck with it, and I do have really fond memories of reading this series. And another graphic novel series that I absolutely love is of course Scott Pilgrim. I have these gorgeous coloured hardback editions which are my absolute pride and joy, and back when I was a teen these were quite extravagant purchases, so it just shows you how much I loved them, because I just knew that I had to carry on with these editions because the colouring and the art is just so beautiful, and this series is just so much fun, and I love the film by Edgar Wright so much. And if you haven't jumped on board this series, or you're looking for sort of an entry-level graphic novel, I think this is a really fun one. Just the art style is gorgeous and the humour really draws you in, and it has a really wacky concept, so I really would recommend this if you're looking for somewhere to start. Also, I just realised I didn't pick up Giant Days because it's a little bit hard to get to now since this new chair, the new addition in my life, is a little bit harder to get to my graphic novel shelf. But if you've been on this channel for any length of time, you will know that the Giant Days graphic novel series is my absolute pride and joy. I love it so much. It's 3 girls living their best lives and sometimes worse lives in Sheffield and while they're at uni, and it just follows the ups and downs of their relationships and their friendships, and it is full of so much love and fun and humour, and it is just wonderful. I dare you not to fall in love with that series. It is so good. And now what we're all here for, the YA. Oh Christ. Oh my god. And these aren't even the complete series, like this is just a stack of book ones of different YA series. So is that gonna balance? Oh Anna, you're taking your life in your hands. Alright, no. Oh god. Okay. Oh my god, I sound like I'm constipated. Okay. So let's start at the top with the most iconic bad bitch, and it is Twilight. And I have obviously completed the Twilight series, but I don't actually own all of the books because I think I lent out books 2 and 3 to a friend who gave them back to me very tattered, and I was quite upset by it. So I ended up giving those away, I think, a couple of years ago, and I vowed to buy the whole series again in beautiful editions, but I've since made the decision that I don't really want to support Stephanie Meyer because of her sort of treatment of Indigenous people and the Quillette tribe, and the fact that she's never made any sort of public apology to the way that she presented them in her book, and also they've never received any monetary like compensation from the series, and like lots of tourism, like people always go there because they want to see like the tribe from the books, but then that's kind of like a bit fetishization-y and weird, and I just think the whole thing is just not great, and I don't really feel comfortable financially supporting her. So as much as it pains me that I don't have Twilight in a complete series on my shelf, I think I don't really see myself rereading the entire series anytime soon, but as long as I have like the first book, this kind of one with sentimental value, the book that started it all, I think that's enough for me. But yeah, so Twilight, the one that started it all, yeah. We then have Matched by Ali Condi, which I was actually talking about on one of our reading sprints recently, which is really interesting because I don't hear anyone ever really talk about this book or this series, and that's because it probably wasn't the best, but I do have fond memories of it because I think it was my gateway into YA dystopia. I remember picking this up in my school library and really, really enjoying it at the time. And the second book I remember being very boring. It's just the two characters crossing a desert for the entire book. And I don't even remember anything about the third one, but I own the entire series, I've read the entire series, and I just can't bring myself to slander it because I do think it was my gateway into so many other books that I loved and still love. So the Match series is always going to have a place on my shelf. Then we have the Delirium trilogy by Lauren Oliver, and I don't remember a lot about this one apart from it's set in a universe where love is banned, so love is outlawed because it, you know, when people are in love they make crazy, rash, dangerous decisions, and so this futuristic government have made this like injection or serum that basically prevents you from being able to feel love. I remember thinking this was like the coolest concept when I was a teenager, like oh my god, but you know, it is quite silly, but I remember enjoying this series at the time, and I read all 3 books, and yeah, it's another one of my completed series. Of course we have the iconic Hunger Games, and this book is so beat up because stupid me took it on my Duke of Edinburgh trip. I didn't want to do my Bronze Duke of Edinburgh without a book. I knew that was going to be a harrowing few days. I thought we were going to have downtime in the evenings at the campsite to read. What I didn't anticipate, which I should have, was that the Great British weather was not in my favour. The odds were not in my favour, and this was in my backpack and it got completely trashed and soaked, and then obviously it was cold and the tent was damp, so it just didn't have a chance to dry properly, and I was very upset. But looking at it a little bit better, it is sort of funny just because I have that memory with it, and I remember thinking like being on Duke of Edinburgh, like trekking through the hills, being like, oh my god, this is like I'm in the Hunger Games. But yeah, another iconic series that I have completed. Sort of. I didn't read the new one, but that doesn't count, so whatever. Another series that I loved so much was The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. I love the series so much. It has a dog, but also a very sad scene involving that dog. You'll know what I mean if you've read it. And I just remember thinking this was such an imaginative world. It's like a futuristic dystopian world where women don't exist, and also you can hear everybody else's thoughts and they appear on the page as noise, so that's what it's called, and a lot of pages in the book are like this. I don't know if you can even see that, but like they're just covered in overlapping thoughts, and the font is really cool, and I remember thinking this was like the coolest thing ever, and I really loved the 2 main characters, Todd and Viola. I shipped them so much, and it's now been made into a movie with Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley, and that was in production in the edit for like 4 years, and honestly I thought it was never going to come out. So I don't know how good that is, but I have such fond memories of this series, so I probably will be checking it out at some point. Another one is Vampire Academy, which is iconic. I love it so much. I actually really want to do a reread of this series this year because I have such fond memories of it, and I recently watched the movie, which is terrible. It's so bad, and it's the kind of bad that makes you doubt whether or not the books were good in the first place. I think they were. I think they were really fun. But this series has 6 books in it, so I really need to like prepare myself, but I am honestly so ready to get back into this world. I love nostalgia, if it wasn't clear already. So many of my videos are about stuff I loved as a kid, or things from my childhood, or like things I read as a teenager. So much of my enjoyment comes from stuff that brought me comfort when I was but a young lass, so I'm really looking forward to getting back to this some point soon. The Lunar Chronicles! Who remembers the Lunar Chronicles? I ate these up. This is a quartet, so there are 4 books in this series, each following a different fairy tale character. So book 1 is Cinder, book 2 is Scarlet, book 3 is Cress, and book 4 is Winter. So that equates to Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, Rapunzel, and Snow White. not exactly those archetypes, but characters inspired by those classic fairy tales. And this is set in a futuristic world where Cinderella is a cyborg, and there's also this lunar queen who lives on the moon, and she's very rude. She's like the villain of the series, and I remember being so into this so much. It was so much fun. And book one really sets up a story between Cinder and Kai, I believe her love interest is, and then book two starts with Scarlet in like a completely different place, and it was just so satisfying to see them all like meet up. And then obviously book three you get introduced to Cress, and then like book four is when they all of them meet, and I don't even remember like what the context of that scene is, but I remember just being like so hyped to see characters that I'd loved for like a couple of years just finally interacting with each other on the page. And I just honestly had so much love for this series. I mean, if you know me at all, you know that I love fairy tales, and so this YA series was honestly like one of the best things to ever happen to me. And next I have A Court of Thorns and Roses. Don't come for me. I know this is technically not a series that I've completed because I've only read the first 3 books, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury, and A Court of War and Ruin. But we were told that that was the trilogy and it was sort of going to end. But then there's another 3 books, but I think they follow different characters. Like, they're characters that are in these books, but they're sort of side characters. And I don't really have any interest in carrying on, but I'm including this in my completed series because I completed the first arc of the series, so I'm including it, shush. And then we have the Maze Runner series, which is another sort of YA dystopian trilogy set in a maze, and I really, really loved the movie with Dylan O'Brien, but that's probably because I was a little Teen Wolf stan. I mean, that's what was so fun about being a YA fan back in the day, was that people that you loved from like TV shows or something would often get cast in, you know, YA adaptations. Like, I remember being so obsessed with The Spectacular Now, which has Miles Teller and Shailene Woodley in it. Also The Fault in Our Stars, which has Shailene Woodley and Ansel Elgort. And then also Divergent, which has Shailene Woodley, Ansel Elgort, and Miles Teller, and it was like all your faves just sort of showed up in all of your adaptations of books that you love, and it was like being part of this little family because you would just see all of these familiar faces everywhere, bringing your favorite books to life, and it was just such an iconic time. I miss it so much. And speaking of Divergent, we have Divergent, which is obviously another YA dystopian trilogy, which I have read all of the books of, and again, fond memories, really fond memories of reading this series, getting hyped for the movie, falling in love with Shailene Woodley, thinking that she was amazing. I remember at first I was like, I thought I hated Shailene Woodley because it was just internalized misogyny and jealousy because she was getting cast in all of the roles that I wanted. You know, I was obsessed with The Fault in Our Stars, I was obsessed with Divergent, and I was just annoyed that like she was getting that bread and that she was going to be in those iconic films and that I wasn't. But I genuinely love this series so much, and I remember dragging my mum, I should say, to the cinema to see Divergent, and it was a fairly quiet bit between Triss and Four, and then Mum leaned over to me and was like, "He's quite dishy, isn't he?" And these like teenage girls that were sat in front of me just turned around like staring daggers, like, "How dare you interrupt this scene?" It was very funny. And then we have The Raven Boys, a series which I still love and hold dear, something that I do also want to reread because my memory is awful, but I do remember absolutely falling in love with this series, falling in love with Blue and Adam and Ronan. And then we have this trilogy called Slated by Terry, which is another YA dystopian thing, but I believe this one was set in Britain, and that's what made it really interesting to me because a lot of the obviously iconic YA series were sort of US based, but this one was set in Britain, and I found that really interesting. And it's about this dystopian world where like if you commit a crime you are then slated, so I think your memory is erased, so you have no memory of the crime you committed and what you did, and you just like live out your life anew, so sort of like a rehabilitation program for criminals. And then this teenage girl, you know, who's been slated, and she doesn't remember the crime she's committed or the life before, is living with a new family, and then suddenly she starts to get flashes and nightmares of a past that she obviously doesn't remember, and she is obviously quite intrigued by this and goes on a journey to find out who she was, what she did, where she came from, what is going on. And I remember really enjoying this series. I mean, I bought the whole trilogy, so I must have loved it enough to do that, and couldn't tell you much more about it, but there it is. And then of course we have the iconic Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. This is a duology, and I also read obviously Shadow and Bone, the Grisha trilogy, but I don't have that to hand because I'm currently reading it, so it's in my bed over there. But yeah, so that's 2 series, Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows. I love these books. I still do. I'm reading Shadow and Bone right now, and it's iconic, and I am so excited for the Netflix show coming out this month. We then have Percy Jackson, very iconic, as well as having read and completed the 5 books in the Percy Jackson series. I've also read and completed the 5 books in the Heroes of Olympus series, as well as reading the 3 books in the Magnus Chase series, and I also own all 5 books in the Trials of Apollo series, because Rick Riordan, he has a hold on me, and it's never gonna break. And then we have A Darker Shade of Magic by Queen V.E. Schwab. I went absolutely feral for this series because I read it when I was slightly older, so it was like past the kind of Hunger Games, Divergent, Maze Runner era. It was like a little bit past that, so I felt a bit more grown up, and this series was a little bit more grown up because it is set in this dystopian London, and there are different shades of London. So there's red London, black London, white London, and grey London? Am I making that up? I could just read the back, you know, because I always find this one in particular hard to describe it to people, but it is so good if you want to get into a new series that is wonderful and layered and gorgeous. I don't actually even think this counts as YA. I think this is an adult book, but anyway. Kel is one of the last travellers, magicians with the rare ability to travel between parallel universes connected by one magical city. There's Grey London, without magic and ruled by the Mad King George III, Red London, where magic is revered and where Kel was raised alongside the heir to an empire, White London, where people fight to control the remaining magic and magic fights back, and there was once Black London. Iconic, amazing, love it. There are, how many? 3 books. This is another trilogy, so yeah, really good. Loved it. I don't think you can see them in the, but my Shadowhunter books are all up there on my top shelf, and they're very heavy, but take my word for it that I have read the entirety of the Mortal Instrument series, so the first 6 books in that series. I've also read the 3 books of the Infernal Devices series and the 3 books of the Dark Artifices series, and I'm currently reading the Last Hours series, and I think that's everything. And I've also read the companion novels, but those aren't series. And then the most recent series that I have read and enjoyed have obviously been The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I go on about this all the time. It's just incredible. The world building, the political intrigue, the enemies to lovers, everything about this is gorgeous, and oh god, if this ever gets adapted, somebody phone me, because I have so many ideas and opinions, and if it's not done right I will actually cry. So it's amazing. I love it so much. Stranger Dreamer is a duology and Cruel Prince is a trilogy, and honestly the imagery and the language in both of these series is just beautiful, and you just can't help but conjure up these magical worlds while you're reading. And I love that I read these more recently, because it did also give me that vibe of like discovering a new world for the first time, which I obviously loved doing as a teenager, reading YA, and I really want to read more series. It's something that I have sort of fallen off the bandwagon with a little bit, because like I say, I'm not really part of that online community as much as I was when I was a teenager, but hopefully now, like being more into booktube and stuff, I can sort of reignite my love and my reading for various series. Do we dare count? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. So by my count, I think that is 32 series that I've completed. I had to include my Shadowhunters and like the other Grisha trilogy because I don't have them in front of me. So I think I'll put a correct number on the screen here if I'm wrong, but I believe that I've completed this number of series in my life. Probably not as impressive, you know, compared to other people on BookTube, but I'm quite shook. Like over 30 series probably, if I've counted right. And I don't even want to think about how many books that equates to, but I will put it somewhere on the screen. This is how many books I've read that are in series, that are complete. It'll be somewhere on the screen. But yeah, I think that's everything I have for today. I had so much fun going down memory lane, as I always do. It's one of my favourite activities. And I really enjoyed talking about some iconic YA series and some more recent loves. And of course, please let me know what your favourite YA series were, or if you're reading a new series now that you think is amazing, please let me know, because I really am looking to get back into that kind of voracious reading that I was doing as a teenager. I was just gobbling up book after book, series after series, and just discovering new worlds and communities, and I really miss that. So do let me know. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Bye!